So, hello, my name is Peter Larson. I'm with Canada Talks Israel-Palestine, and I'm really glad to have with me this afternoon Harold Shuster from Winnipeg. Harold is an activist, human rights activist, and I understand a member of Independent Jewish Voices. And Harold, thank you very much for spending a few minutes with us.
You're very welcome, Peter. And just to clarify, not only am I a member of Independent Jewish Voices, I'm actually the chair of the National Steering Committee.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Okay. So I'm talking to a honcho.
That I deserve.
Okay, that's fine. Harold, there have been an interesting series of events take place in Winnipeg over the last 10 days or so, mostly centering around an event that was organized by the Social Planning Council that had as one of its speakers a woman named Linda Sarsour, who is a well-known American human rights activist, and to whom Bnai Brith Canada took exception and tried to cancel the event. Can you just run through the film for us of what happened over those 10 days?
Sure. It was over a month in total. I was first contacted by the Social Planning Council on March 20th. And at that time, the event that you referred to, titled Sorry, Not Sorry, Unapologetically Working for Social Justice, organized by the Social Planning Council and the Canadian Women's Institute of Canada, had booked a facility for that event. When news of that event became made public and some within the Zionist community discovered that Linda Sarsour was going to be one of the speakers, they immediately went to the venue host, which were the Seven Oaks School Division. And I'm not sure what sort of time frame, but very quickly that event contacted the Social Plan Council and told them that they were withdrawing their booking. So at that point, the Social Planning Council contacted myself and others to sort of find out, okay, the Bnai Brith has done this, what can we expect them to do next, and how can we sort of build community or solidarity to make sure that this event continues to happen.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Sure. So this event, Linda is a human rights activist, but she is also a Palestinian. This event to which she was invited, was it to focus on the Israel-Palestine question?
No, absolutely not. In fact, no. And Linda is American. I don't know. I shouldn't be careful with this. I don't believe she was born in Palestine. I believe her family or parents are Palestinian. She's an American, but has been very active and an outspoken critic of the situation in Palestine and Israel. She came as a community organizer and an activist. She was one of the primary organizers around the March on Washington that took place right after Trump was elected. So she was invited to Winnipeg to speak on a panel with two other activists to talk about building community and how do you have difficult conversations, how do you work across what many perceive as barriers to build community to improve the conditions of people living wherever they are living. So okay. Palestine was not a part of this at all.
But Bnai Brith objected to her because they were alleging that she has this terrible anti-Semitic streak to her. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. Yeah. They claim that, as they do with just about anybody who dares criticize the state of Israel, that if you criticize Israel, you are an anti-Semite. I myself have been accused of being an outspoken anti-Semite of Jewish birth, simply because I dare criticize the Israeli government for their policies and practice as it pertains to the Palestinian people.
So the school board canceled it. There was some rushing around to find another venue. And then did Bnai Brith kind of give up then and agree that they were beaten?
No, of course. No, they doubled down. It got even more difficult for the Social Planning Council. One of the key sort of opponents to the event is an individual who lives in Winnipeg, a former Israeli Defense Force person. He then launched an online campaign, petition campaign that got over 1,000 signatures. And of course, if you're familiar with some of these online petitions, you can then also send comments. So the Social Planning Council was receiving many, many very, very nasty comments about, you know, who they were and the organization that they were co-sponsoring with, and how dare they do this, and don't they know what a terrible, horrible person Linda is. And part of what IJV did, and the people that we've been able to work in solidarity with, is we would then send supportive messages. So, you know, whenever, I don't know, you know, to what extent our messages played to their comments, but that was part of what we were doing, to show them that there was support out there. There was then the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal also started an online petition that resulted in, I don't know how many signatures, but it also, you know, resulted in a stream of very Islamophobic, hateful emails that both of the organizations got. And the Social Planning Council stuck to their guns. They, you know, they weathered that storm. Then the...
How'd the mayor get involved? I understand the mayor even got involved.
Well, the mayor got involved in the last weeks of the campaign. So the mayor did approach the Social Planning Council privately about a week and a half before the event, and, you know, asked them to, you know, to disinvite Linda, and Social Planning Council kindly, you know, disregarded the mayor's comments. And then a most unfortunate event happened at a cafe that was owned by a Russian Jewish family. I'm not going to go into the details because there's a criminal investigation now. The owners of the cafe have been arrested in regards to the attack.
This was the allegation of some kind of
anti-Semitic attack, yes. Yeah, the inside of the restaurant was trashed. There was swastikas painted on the walls. And this was also a restaurant that had been the site of a couple of previous anti-Semitic attacks. So I think that might have pushed the mayor to take a stance. And so he, you know, organized a press conference. He was flanked by members of the Bnai Brith, members of the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg, and again asked, you know, the Social Planning Council to disinvite Linda. And that's how the mayor got involved. That's launched, you know, more of the sort of Palestinian solidarity community to come together, independent Jewish voices, along with the Canadian Palestine Support Network, organized Winnipeg Coalition Against Israeli Apartheid, Canadian Palestinian Association in Manitoba, Peace Alliance Winnipeg, and the, remember the acronym now, the Muslim Association of Manitoba. We all co-signed a letter that we then hand-delivered to the mayor, critiquing his position on this, and asking for a meeting with him as well.
Did you get it?
We haven't yet. Like I say, we did hand deliver it. He was, you know, he accepted it. He was open to the idea of meeting, and we are still in the process of following up to get that meeting with the mayor.
And my understanding is that the local newspaper also had an editorial on that, saying, perhaps not defending Sarsour, I'm not sure, but saying that the mayor oughtn't to be shutting down debate or something. Exactly.
Yeah, they did. I think that actually ran on the Friday before the event. And it was, you know, the editorial board of the paper, again, not defending Sarsour, but saying that this is not the kind of situation where a elected public official should be publicly speaking out against having anybody come to the city. Sort of critical of him, sort of taking a paternal attitude towards the citizens of Winnipeg, and that, you know, the mayor should allow people to go to these events, listen to what people have to say, and then make their own decisions on whether or not what the person has to say is, you know, something that they want to believe or something that they feel is hateful and should be banned from, well, not banned, but something hateful, in that the citizens of Winnipeg need to be the ones to decide who they should go and see and who they should be listening to.
Would they apply that to an extreme right-wing, obviously anti-Semitic, I can't think of a name, but...
Well, one of the examples that was used, that Jordan Peterson, who I'm sure some of your listeners would be familiar with, he came to Winnipeg, and there are many that find what he has to say very offensive. The mayor didn't say anything about that.
Okay. So in the face of all this pressure, the Social Planning Council folded, is that right?
Not at all. In fact, I think after the mayor's comments, people, you know, were even more excited and more interested in coming to hear what Linda had to say. I think the biggest, or a concern that some people had is that Linda might not have been allowed to enter the country.
Right.
Right. And that was certainly something that, you know, more than a few people were talking about, wondering whether or not that would happen. But she arrived in Winnipeg on Friday. The Social Planning Council quickly organized a press conference, which IJV was invited, and I was happy to sit at that table with Linda. And on behalf of the Jews who were part of Independent Jewish Voices, I welcomed her to the city. The event was a sellout. It was absolutely packed. Ukrainian Labor Temple came forward, and they offered their historic building in Winnipeg's famed North End. There were over 300 people. There was a small group of maybe 24 Zionist protesters on the other side of the street waving their Israeli flags and not really saying much else. And the event was amazing. You know, like I say, it was a fabulous event. And Linda then, you know, spent the next couple of days in Winnipeg. And I was then also happy to be able to invite her to the secular Jewish community that I'm a part of, had our Passover Seder on that Saturday night. So not only did I welcome Linda, but she was then welcomed by our Jewish community to share a Passover Seder with us, and that was fabulous.
Harold, so we have, on the one hand, we have Bnai Brith. I hope you won't object to my characterizing it this way, but on the other hand, you have Independent Jewish Voices.
Mm-hmm.
What's been the effect on the bulk of Jews, or the mainstream Jewish community in Winnipeg? What will be your sense of how they would have been affected by this development?
My involvement or connection to the mainstream is pretty minimal. So I think that Winnipeg overall Jewish community is fairly conservative. Not necessarily big C conservative, but fairly conservative. I also know from 2 recent surveys that you know, looked at attitudes of Jews across the country, that the Bnai Brith does not, in many situations, represent even the majority of where Jewish people are across this country. This notion that, you know, that they speak for the Jewish community, that there is a Jewish community, or that the Federation speaks for the Jewish, or CJA speaks for the Jewish community. You know, within Jews, there's the joke that 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So somehow that there is a single Jewish community, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in any population. There isn't an indigenous community. There isn't a Black community. There are people of Jewish descent who have a wide range of opinions on what's going on in Israel-Palestine. I think most Jews would be offended by the mayor telling them who they should listen to. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay. Now, is this going to move, you know, IJV to have a sudden rush of new members? I don't think so, but I think it does send a message to the mayor and hopefully to other politicians that nobody can speak for the Jewish community. There isn't a Jewish community. Okay. There are a variety of opinions. The Bnai Brith represents a segment of the population, and IJV represents a segment of the population. And I think that we need to be included in more of those conversations about how, you know, something is going to affect the Jewish community.
Mm-hmm. So going forward, what would you say are the main lessons, the main takeaway from this? What have you learned, and what might you do differently the next time round? Because I'm assuming that Bnai Brith will not fold up its tent. It's going to continue to try to defend Israel. Mm-hmm. And you're going to continue to try to defend human rights for everybody living in the Middle East. But what would you do differently, or what do you think the Social Planning Council organizers should do differently, or might do differently?
Well, I think that I don't think I think what the Social Planning Council did was amazing. I mean, that was an incredible, you know, attack against them, and for a kind of a community-based, community kind of financed organization to stand up to the onslaught, I think that was just amazing. And Kate Kaler, who their executive director, and their board, which, you know, certainly supported them as well, needs to get a lot of credit for not backing down. For IJV, I think in Winnipeg, anyhow, we just have to do more of what we've been doing. I think part of why this succeeded is that we have, over the last 4 or 5 years, developed some really good relationships and partnerships in working on this issue. So we have good connections with faith-based communities, with other human rights and peace and justice communities. And I think the big thing that we need to work on is developing stronger relationships with the Muslim and Arab community. Right at our, so Linda came to our Passover Seder. Members of the women, the Canadian Muslim Women's Institute came to our Seder. We need to be doing more things with them because, as we say, the racism that is out there is hurting all of us, right? Jews are being attacked, Muslims are being attacked. The rise of white nationalism means that we need to band together, and our safety and security is bound up and tied to everybody's safety and security. And we can only adequately defend against that when we work together and not being separated.
Without putting words in your mouth, I have the feeling over the last 5 years that the organizations interested in promoting human rights in the Middle East have moved slightly away from a Che Guevarist kind of a position to let's make alliances, let's talk to organizations that we don't necessarily completely agree with, but are human rights progressive kind of organizations. Would that be does that sound true to you?
It does for me, certainly on this in dealing with the situation in the Middle East. And I think part of that stemmed from the Palestinian civil society calls for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, right? Mm-hmm. They realize that they're not going to win, a battle of bullets against the Israeli military, right? What they need is international global support for what's going on. And just for people to start recognizing what exactly is happening in the Middle East. Because so much of what we get is really just based on, the poor Israelis. The Israelis are, under threat. Everybody just wants to wipe them off the map. They are the David against this Muslim Goliath. And the reality is quite reversed. There, Israel has the fourth or fifth most powerful military in the world. There's no country in that region that is any sort of real threat to them. And they need to realize that their survival is not going to come at the demise of the Palestinians. Right? And so Palestinian solidarity is growing, and people are starting to realize that if you support human rights, you have to support the human rights of everybody, and that includes the Palestinian people.
Harold Shuster, chairman of IJV in Canada, resident in Winnipeg, thank you very much for your insights today, and let us know when something new and exciting happens next time in Winnipeg.
I will for sure, Peter. Thank you very much for the interview. I appreciate it.